Evan Brooks didn't remember the promise. It was spoken 15 years earlier, in a hospital room, under the soft hum of machines. Evan was 19 then, shattered by the sudden loss of his mother, his father already gone years before. In one night, his world had collapsed. He sat in a corner, knees pulled to his chest, while outside, the city kept moving as if nothing had happened. And then there was Clara. She was 18. His best friend since childhood, the girl who lived 2 houses down. She knew how he took his coffee and how he shut down when life got too loud. She stood before him, hands trembling, and said the words that would shape her entire life. "Evan," she said softly, "I won't leave you, no matter what happens. I promise." He nodded faintly, wrapped in the fog of grief. He heard her, but he didn't truly hold onto her words. To him, it was comfort in a storm. To Clara, it became a sacred vow. Years passed. Evan left town for college, a career, success. Clara stayed. She worked 2 jobs while studying online, quietly saving money. She sent Evan care packages during his finals, packed with his favorite snacks and encouraging notes he never replied to. He just assumed she was kind. He never asked what she gave up. Clara turned down scholarships in other states, a job offer in New York, even a relationship with a man who wanted to build a future with her. When her mother asked why she always chose others over herself, Clara just smiled gently and said, "Because I promised." No one understood, not even Evan. He'd call her when he was overwhelmed, when work was crushing him, when loneliness crept in. "You're the only place that feels like home," he once said over the phone. Clara held that sentence in her heart like a treasure. She never told him what it cost her. One winter, Evan returned. He'd been promoted, had a new apartment, a new life. They met at a small cafe, the same one from their teenage years. "You look tired," he said casually. Clara just smiled. "I'm okay." He talked about his career, his plans, his future. She listened, like she always did. "You should come live near me," he said suddenly. "It would be nice." Her heart skipped a beat. "I can't," she replied gently. "Why not?" She hesitated. "I have things here." He shrugged. "You're always holding yourself back." The words stung, but she didn't show it. That night, Clara sat in her room and reread an old journal. On the first page, she had written, "I won't leave him. I promise." She whispered into the quiet. I kept it. Years later, Clara collapsed at work. Exhaustion, burnout, an undiagnosed illness. When Evan heard, he flew back immediately. He sat beside her hospital bed, guilt heavy in his eyes. "You should have told me you were struggling," he said. She smiled weakly. "You needed to shine. I didn't want to dim your light." Something in her words broke him. "Why would you ever think that?" he whispered. Clara turned her face toward the window. "You once needed someone who wouldn't leave," she said softly. Evan froze. A memory stirred. A hospital room. A voice. A promise. He finally remembered. And in that moment, he understood everything. He sat frozen beside Clara's hospital bed, the memory striking him like lightning. A dim room. A boy collapsed in grief, and a girl's trembling voice. "I won't leave you. I promise." Grief had drowned out the world back then, but she had lived inside that promise for 15 years. "Clara." His voice cracked. "You stayed. All this time." She turned to him, her eyes tired but calm. "I never wanted you to feel alone," she whispered. "I couldn't fix what you lost, but I could stay." Evan looked at her hands, thin and trembling. Hands that had packed boxes for him instead of chasing her own dreams. Hands that had held him up without ever asking to be seen. "You gave up your life for me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. She shook her head gently. "No, I gave up pieces of it. Because love isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It just stays. Tears streamed down his face. I thought you were just kind, he admitted. I never knew it was a sacrifice. That's why it was a promise, she replied, not a transaction. Silence filled the room. Then Evan finally said the words he owed her. I'm sorry. She smiled faintly. You don't need to be. I do. He insisted. Because I built my future on a foundation I didn't even know was there. Clara closed her eyes. You didn't ask me to do this. I chose it. But I lived as if you were unlimited, he replied, as if you had nothing to lose. She opened her eyes. Now you know, she whispered. Clara's condition stabilized. The doctors said stress and exhaustion had worsened what could have been treated earlier. Evan took a long leave from work. Not just a weekend, but months. He moved back to their hometown. For the first time, he became truly present. He cooked for her, drove her to appointments, and sat beside her in comfortable silence. Slowly, Clara saw something new in him. Evan was no longer the boy who needed saving. He was a man learning how to stay. One evening, as the sun set, Evan spoke. You built your life around me, he said. Now let me build one around you. Clara's breath caught. I don't need to be rescued, she replied softly. I know, he said. I just don't want to be the only one who gets a future anymore. For the first time, she wasn't protecting him. She was allowing herself to be seen. Weeks later, Clara stood outside a small art studio. I used to paint, she admitted quietly. Before everything. Then go back, Evan encouraged. She hesitated. I don't know who I am without taking care of someone. Evan smiled gently. Then let's find out together. Clara enrolled. She painted late into the night, and colors she had buried for years began to resurface. Stories she had never told appeared on canvas. One day, she showed Evan a piece. It depicted a hospital room, a boy on the floor, and a girl standing before him. Above them, written softly, were the words, I stayed. Evan swallowed hard. You kept a promise I didn't even remember, he said. She set her brush down. And now you're keeping one I never asked for, she replied. They stood in quiet understanding, realizing that promises weren't chains, but bridges. Months later, Evan took Clara to that same cafe from their teenage years. I once told you that you hold yourself back, he began. She smiled faintly. You did. I was wrong, he said. You were holding the world together. He reached across the table. Clara, I don't want to be the center of your life anymore. I want to walk beside it. Her eyes filled with tears. I spent years staying, she whispered. Now I want to live. And I want to live with you, Evan said. Not as someone she carried, but as someone who carried her, too. Thank you for listening. Some promises are whispered in moments of pain and kept in silence for a lifetime. If this tale touched your heart, remember that the love that stays unseen is still powerful. For more emotional stories about life, sacrifice, and human connection, be sure to subscribe to Tales Studio.